Hey, everybody. Welcome to the AI Playbook podcast by Lattice Partners. I'm Colin McDonald and I'm joined by Christian Yegnazar. Christian, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm doing well. I'm excited to do the podcast with you guys. I'm gonna try and look my
Awesome.
best. So be on my best
Awesome.
behavior. So
That's what we like to hear. And we're joined also by Martin Oncatil. Martin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I will say when you did the intro, you started by saying the AI, and then I was like, "What is he saying?" And then I realized that's the name of our podcast. I had
That
forgotten because it's been
that
so
is
long
the
since we
name.
did it. But
That
it's
is the
called
name
the
of
but
the
AI
don't
Playbook.
worry,
podcast.
we're back.
We're back. You missed us. No, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We got some good topics. I feel like this has been the last few weeks in AI land where it feels like months are happening. Like I had some topics written down from last week, and I'm like, that was like 4 days ago. It feels like months ago. So,
That's like every week, I feel like, in AI land, especially
yeah.
these last 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about that yesterday, actually, because this is not one of the things we were going to talk about. But I remember feeling a few years ago, like, oh, I'm 24, I'm 25, and like nothing interesting is happening. Like in the early 2000s, there was .com, and then in the 2010s, there was like, mobile and social and all this stuff. And then we got like a little bit of crypto, but like it was, it didn't really go anywhere interesting. And I was like, I remember at that period really feeling like, damn, I missed it. Like it's happened. And then now it's like, holy crap, there's just so much happening in any given like day or week.
Too old to too old to explore the internet, but too young to explore space. Right on time to explore artificial intelligence.
Exactly. Um, yeah, it's exciting times. I think Christian, you had a story, a topic you wanted to bring up to start.
Oh boy, do I have a topic for you all to start us off. So yes, let me go ahead and pull up this article. So as I'm sure a lot of you have heard, there has been this article that's kind of been going around the web of this man creating a $1 billion company on his own. So we thought we could dive into it a little bit, kind of talk through what exactly he did and kind of our thoughts on it. So before I get going, Martin, Colin, are you able to see the New York Times article?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll kind of walk through it for everyone that is listening on audio only. But essentially, the title of this article by the New York Times is How AI Helped One Man and His Brother Build a $1.8 billion company. Who needs more than two employees when artificial intelligence can do so many corporate tasks? It's super efficient and a little bit lonely. So I'll kind of just quickly skim this, but essentially the guy's name is Matthew Gallagher, and it says that he took just 2 months and $20,000 of seed money and more than a dozen artificial tools, a dozen artificial intelligent tools to get his startup off the ground, which is now at $1.8 billion in revenue. Mr. Gallagher, as the article calls him, I'm just going to call him Matthew, he basically started this company from his house, and without going into too much details, essentially the company is called Medv, and it is a telehealth provider of GLP-1 weight loss drugs. In its first month, it got 300 customers. In its second month, it gained 1,000 more customers. And then in 2025, during its first full year of business, Medv generated $401 million in sales, which is kind of insane to think about. At that point, Matthew then hired his only employee, which was his younger brother, and this year they're on track to do 1.8 billion in sales. So I think the real big, and then I think it kind of goes into Matthew's background of he had experimented with AI tools right when ChatGPT came out. He was somewhat of a tech savvy individual, but not necessarily the most like the best software engineer ever. But he found the right opportunity at the right time and then started building it. And kind of the big, I think for me, takeaway here is that something like this previously would have had to have multiple people on the IT side managing and upkeeping the digital platform, right? The telehealth platform. You would need a lot of customer support agents. You would need people on the medical side. you would need press, PR, marketing, right? This is a heavy marketing play, right? Getting people to use your platform versus another. And Matt Gallagher was able to do it with just himself, AI, and then his brother, probably to help out with some other administrative tasks. Um, Now, I'm curious, Martin and Colin, what you guys think of this because obviously the headline is super, super flashy, right? One man, $1.8 billion company. I think that's been kind of going around the Twitter sphere, all these articles. I know my mom actually sent me this article and she was like, look at this. Like, is this kind of like what you're doing? And so this is hitting a lot of people outside of just, the tech world and people in AI. And I'm curious what you guys think of this.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I also my dad's pretty tapped in, but he also sent this to me, which is also it's always interesting when like a story breaks contingency of like it escapes the Twitter sphere. I think it's very interesting. I think at first glance it's cool. It's very cool. Someone's able to build it. Just the first few lines of like, this is a company that's less than 2 years old and it's gonna do $2 billion in revenue this year on its own is like awesome. Like that's cool. Even if you told me it took 200 people, like the fact that someone started a company and it's doing that, like purely from an entrepreneurship perspective, I find that really compelling. No doubt it's super enabled by like productivity gains by AI. There's like a few things that stood out to me and things I've seen since this story came out. One of them is that, let me try to pull up the tweet. There was kind of a tweet that was explaining a few of the issues here. So I guess one thing to point out immediately, a lot of the things that they're doing, this business is just reselling like GLP-1s or like just getting people access to like Ozempic type things, as well as thing like peptides and maybe like kind of the stuff that you would get on Row, I think. So like, I don't know, like physical performance, hormone balance, that kind of stuff. I don't know exactly what that stuff means, but kind of just like supplements as well. And so I think there's something there too to consider, which is like you can do $2 billion in revenue and do like $0 in profit, right? Or like you could do 2 billion in revenue and actually like lose money. So that on its own this is not a $2 billion company. It's a company that will probably do 2 billion in revenue. So more of a nitpicky thing there, which is like, to do $2 billion, to be a $2 billion company, you have to either be valued by investors at $2 billion or like have your own valuation, which says like, we're making enough money that, with a common sense multiple in our industry, we're more or less valued at this. So that's more of a nitpicky thing, but there's all kinds of little issues with this. Like, they track down kind of their Facebook, and on Facebook you can see all the ads that an account is running, and they're basically running a bunch of ads for it as like fake doctors. So with the help of AI, they've made like fake doctor pages that are basically like recommending this, which is, as far as I understand, like not legal to do that, to pretend to be a doctor that doesn't actually exist and to say doctor this or have an MD or something like that. And so they're running all kinds of ads on that. I think there's a pretty big amount of FDA compliance that people much smarter than me and more knowledgeable than me pointed out. But as a whole, it's like, okay, cool. Like this thing is definitely working and making money, but like how? And is this ethical or not? I do think there's also an interesting trend here, which is like, there's been $2 billion spent on this platform that didn't exist two years ago, which is also, to me, also more indicative of like the GLP trend, which I feel like I'm not tapped into, but just seems like it's never ending, the interest in that. But no doubt that AI is helping along the way. I mean, you can see all of their pictures on their website are all like AI, to me. Not a bad thing at all, but just you can kind of tell. So I don't know. I found it interesting. I think it's cool. I think there will be $1 billion one-person company. Another thing that I was going to mention, I'm pretty sure they have like a bunch of contractors and stuff. So like the one-person thing doesn't even make sense to me. Like he literally hired his brother. Like it says that like in the very beginning, and then it says he has 7 account managers. hired on a contract. So it's like, yeah, I mean, by that logic, like Google could be a one person company if everybody there was a contractor, you know? So we're kind of stretching the definition here. And I was kind of surprised that the New York Times ran this story, because I think they're a little bit less friendly to like tech and tech optimistic stories. So that was also kind of strange to me, but just a bunch of thoughts there.
I think it's just crazy that, I mean, regardless of everything aside, and the fact that there might be some sketchy things about it, it's crazy that in 1 year, 1.5 years, the company hit $2 billion in revenue. Just even like you said, even with 200 people, that's pretty insane. I think it also shows, like you said, with the peptide craze and everyone kind of thinking about Ozempic and all these different GLPs, like that is a huge reason. But also, I think it shows more broadly the people are just spending a lot of money. I think like consumers are just spending a lot right now on
Mm-hmm.
very specific things. It seems like AI is obviously, people are spending a lot of money on like anything related to health, longevity, uh, all of that kind of stuff is a big topic or big place that people are spending money. So it's more than anything, it's interesting to me that a company was able to blow up that quickly and have so much revenue.
Yeah.
Even if they are making $0 or losing money, they're still able to sell $2 billion worth of peptides. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy. Without a brand name too, like the Hims and Hers stuff, they were able to reach that height. It's that just shows to me that people are like willing to spend money right now on things that they think will, I guess, make their lives better, which for a lot of people is like AI and health stuff. Kind of the barbell approach of like you have the super AI and then you have super like physical health optimization things that people are spending their money on.
Yeah, I think they kind of caught a wave of like people looking for that. So it's like it feels like that would be really hard to replicate something like that for a CPG company or something else like that, because so much marketing dollars have to go into driving them to your site versus maybe the market of people like looking for telehealth appointments for GLP-1 to start and then other supplements is less. So I think there's a combination of things that kind of go into actually helping them achieve what they did. I think the other thing that's interesting, and maybe this is a tangential thing, and I think going back to what we had said, it's like this is reaching people outside of technology, AI. I think this kind of brings back something that I feel like is very relevant to the AI world. It's called Amara's Law. Essentially, basically, what it is that people in general tend to overestimate a technology at its start in the short term, but in the long term, they underestimate its capabilities. So I think something like this, right? You see somebody that's older or even an executive or something like that, and they're like, wait a minute, right? These guys just generated $2 billion with one person. Like, why do we need all of these employees? Why do we need all of this? And they're jump directly to the conclusion that AI can run half their business for them, which I think is a vast overestimation of what AI can do and honestly should do. And I wonder if the rebound effects of that will be, wait a minute, like this is not working well. I know in the short-term rental market, right? I think there was a huge correction to using AI agents to help chat for customer support. And in the last few months, it's kind of been a big rebound back to actual humans talking, because guests were able to tell, I know I'm talking to an AI and I can kind of game the system here and it just wasn't working. So I wonder if there will be a rebound effect with execs at really big companies after they try to go so far into AI. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit nebulous and far away, but just something I wonder and think about.
Yeah, I think it there's another thing here, which is like, how does AI fit into like the modern company, and like the way we think about companies today, and like how a company is structured, and like what matters to a company is relatively actually sort of new. Like I remember reading about like this guy, I looked up the name, like Frederick Winslow Taylor, who came up with this concept of like scientific management, which I remember when I was reading about this, I was like, why was this a big deal? But his whole thing was you should measure how productive people are and try to make them more productive. And this was like in the 1920s or something when you're first getting a lot of like a lot more factories, a lot more industrial production, all that kind of stuff. And so that's coming up for the first time where you're like, oh shoot, like I have all these workers, I should try to make them really efficient. And like that is a new concept. That's something that like society has to work with. And then you get kind of like more firms emerging in the 50s, and you have like the nature of the firm, which is this book or paper about that as well, and like how to structure a company, and like what's the best way to structure a company. Like now it's common sense that like you hire people when you don't want to do the thing yourself anymore, but like, oh, when should I hire someone versus hire someone externally, right? And now I think the next layer to that is, when do I hire someone versus put in the effort to have an AI agent do it? And I think that's where it's going to get interesting, is like, does the fundamental like nature of what a company is change moving forward? And that's where this like one-person billion-dollar company thing can be really interesting. At the end of the day, to me, my issue with the one-person billion-dollar company is, well, if one person can generate $1 billion of wealth, wouldn't you just bring in a second person and make another billion, right? Like the marginal value, it seems like, of one person's work is extremely high in this context. So you probably should bring in more people. That's kind of my gut reaction to it, but I think it's a fun narrative.
Well, they hit 2 billion after they brought their brother in, so maybe
Exactly.
maybe you're
Gotta
right.
bring in
Maybe
another
there is
brother. You got any other brothers lying around? This guy,
one more
you gotta
brother
get
and they're
another
at 3
brother in the
billion.
mix, and then yeah, gotta get more siblings. Start. I don't know who else you'd bring in at that point, but
No, what this reminds me, I mean, I think you pulled the Frederick Taylor from this article. Is kind of a sidestep, but it reminds me of this article that Jack Dorsey put out
oh yeah,
last week or 2 weeks ago, From Hierarchy to Intelligence, which basically outlines exactly what Martin was saying, where corporate structures and a structure of a business is shifting from being very hierarchical to almost like a circle centered around intelligence, and the AI kind of driving this intelligence narrative. And so I think it's going to show like the way that you build a business now is definitely changing. Whether it's one person $1 billion company or 50 people $1 billion company, it is changing how people build businesses. And I think that also brings up like, that's why a lot of people are scared, is because they see a $1 billion company with one person and they're like, wow, my company's worth $1 billion and there's 500 of us. Like, they're going to get rid of all 499 people because they only need one person. And that like permeates fear into the market. So
yeah.
there's a lot of second order effects from an article like this coming out.
Totally. Yeah, and I don't know how productive it is. It's like human organization is worth a lot. Like coordination, like at Lattice we've been bringing on people as well, and it's like, yeah, we have our AI agents and they do great stuff, but like when you bring in someone with subject matter expertise, they now have more leverage because they can use AI agents and build AI agents. So each person is still bringing in net new value. It's not like just one person with infinite agents doing everything.
The last thing I'll say on this topic is the one thing that I think the article says in the title is that it's a bit lonely. It doesn't really sound super fun to build $1 billion company by yourself. Like, I think part of the fun, especially with even like with
Totally.
Lattice, is you get to build a company with your friends and people you like working with and hanging out with, and that's the best part of building a company, not doing it alone and making $1 billion.
Absolutely. Damn, that's deep. That's deep. I agree. I agree 100%. I
It's the
agree
friends you
100%.
make along the way.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of connects to, as we're talking about like agents and like kind of companies and how they're structured. Colin, you've been doing a lot of thinking, like working on our internal agents and for some of our clients too, on like what's the best way to like structure a memory. So, kind of curious, maybe you can kind of give a lay of the land of like how people have been thinking about structuring memory and knowledge for AI agents before, and like how they're thinking about it now, or what you're kind of coming across now.
Yeah, it's a very interesting subject, and this is near and dear to me because I studied cognitive science in college and am very interested in the brain. And it feels like with a lot of what we're doing with these agents is we're trying to recreate the human brain. So people are pulling from a lot of concepts from psychology on how to like create a great memory system or how to do long-term episodic memory versus short-term memory and how can you get the most out of your agents. And so at Lattice, we had an episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, where we talked solely about Randy, who's our internal AI agent that can kind of do everything, which is super helpful. It's knowledgeable. It's plugged into all of our stuff, Notion, Google, Slack, everywhere that we are. There's this agent kind of following along and collecting data. One problem that we started to come across as we're growing and hiring more people is sometimes we'll hire a person specifically for one project or one client work, and we want to give them access to Randy because it's very powerful. It has all the context and knowledge of our business, but we don't want to give it access to everything. Financials, contracts, legal, HR stuff should not be exposed to an external contractor and sometimes even an internal full-time employee that maybe has one specific domain they're focusing on. So I've been doing a lot of thinking and reading over the last couple of weeks of how can we build systems that are permissioned and segregated into the specific place they should be. And so I came across this article. It was perfect timing. I was kind of working on something similar, and then this article by, again, Andre Karpathy, who seems to keep putting out banger tweets that everyone resonates
This
with.
guy's
And they're
kind
like,
of
wow,
smart, turns out, I
dude,
guess. This guy's a little bit
it's
smart.
well, it's crazy because he keeps dropping these tweets, and then everyone shifts the entire AI industry to start
Yeah.
accommodating for what he's thinking about. And it's
Hmm.
also like very relevant and timely things that he's putting out. They're always like people are thinking about it, but they're not articulating it well. And so he articulates it well. Andre Karpathy is the one that coined the term vibe coding, I think a year and a half ago now. And so he recently put out this article or this tweet called LLM knowledge bases. And he basically was explaining that he's been using AI agents to ingest a bunch of data from all different sources. So articles, papers, repos, data sets. And then he puts all that raw data into a directory. And then he has an LLM actually compile what he's calling a wiki. So it's going through and reading all of the raw data, pulling the important stuff, and then building a wiki separately. And it's running all of this stuff automatically. There's no human in the loop where it's managing what data is ingested or how the AI ingests it. So he basically put up an AI agent, say, on a specific research topic, gives it a ton of articles, gives it all these different sources, and then it's constantly scraping these sources to update the wiki based on new information coming in. And it creates a really, really good data set of information around a specific piece of information. And so this is a really short tweet. It's pretty simple, but he basically is building this memory file system on his computer using Obsidian, which is basically a file management system that you can run locally. And so I took some of this knowledge here and applied it to Lattice and how we're doing our agentic systems and setup. So now we have, every time we get a new client or we have a specific client, we will deploy a sub agent of Randy for that specific client that acts as kind of the subject matter expert for the specific client. And so the each sub agent is pulling data from very specific sources that this data is okay for anybody that's on a project to see. So it's reading the Slack channels that everyone is in, constantly reading all the tweets and posts and threads and stuff, ingesting all that data. It's reading our linear for tickets when we're doing development. It's reading our GitHub to look at commits, the code, all of that kind of stuff. And then it also has access to our meeting notes for a specific client. So it has 4 really good data sources and more that we're adding consistently, where it's consistently scraping everything. It's a couple of times a day. It's scraping this information, adding it to its wiki, and then refining it. And so now when you ask a question to one of these sub agents, I'll use, we have a client, AppMax, manufacturing company in Florida. We named the agent Max. So anytime we talk to Max, who's the specific agent for AppMax, it has the most up-to-date, best knowledge possible on the AppMax project. And people are able to jump in. There's an onboarding flow so they can say, hey, I'm new to the AppMax project. Can you onboard me? And it walks you through all the steps you need to take as a new employee to onboard. So in sum, I think that this is a really good, interesting way to expand a business that expands well with expanding headcount. So as you hire more people, we're not hiring people because of this. We're hiring more people actually because of this. And now they're just supercharged to do really great work on their specific project.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see this too because he uses Obsidian as kind of the front end, which Obsidian I was using as like a note taking tool, which is like just uses like Markdown, which is like it's interesting to see all this stuff converge on like very simple tooling in a way. Like AI a few years ago, the like what you had to do was you had to use RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and so to do that you had to take all the text that you had and you had to embed them. And so you embed them, you give them some kind of numerical value in like a multi-dimensional space, and then when you search something, you embed that into some numbers, and then you search those numbers across like all the data that you have. And like you had to use this very specific vector database for this, and that was kind of what was standard at the time, and that was partially a reflection of like the AI models were not very good at searching through data, so they couldn't figure out, you know, tool use was still very early. Like AI didn't know how to use tools, it was just text, and so you had to really do all the retrieval for the AI. Now it's basically just using like Obsidian is like just a front end for these markdown files, but it's a very simple tool. You have markdown that connects to each other, and it can kind of traverse that graph and explore knowledge that way, which coming from like, I don't know if you started this in like cognitive science, Colin, but in computer science, like a lot of what we did was also like graph theory and like what's the most efficient way through to a graph, and like, I don't know, all kinds of fun theoretical stuff. And so it's interesting to see the solution kind of converge to something. I mean, we were talking about it this morning, like converging on like a simple solution. Like I find that very fun and almost like reassuring, because I think very rarely is the most complex solution, at least philosophically, the most correct one. Then the actual implementation can be kind of complicated. But it's the same thing with like large language models, right? Like the best way to train a large language model now is just to give it a bunch of data, right? Or that was kind of the breakthrough, and then you iterate on that, obviously. But it's cool to see that there's so much research here, and how we're leveraging it internally and testing it out.
It makes sense too. Sorry, I just had one quick point. It makes sense too the way that this is working. Like humans, when you're our brains, when you are thinking about a subject, we're innately building like a wiki on a specific topic. So Martin has a lot of knowledge on computer science. He kind of has like a wiki stored in his brain that is, anytime he gets new information regarding computer science or tech, it goes to that specific wiki, and then it's consistently adding to it. He's implicitly refining that wiki in his brain and building a knowledge source. So people are starting to use like these kind of common topics in neuroscience to build AI agents that are really smart. So it makes a lot of sense how this is kind of shaping out.
Yeah, and I was gonna say something similar actually, and it's funny because this is maybe a really rudimentary way to look at it, but like if you think back to high school, right? When you had to write a research paper and learn a lot about a topic, like what was the easiest place to like that I think like every single person like used as a source without actually using it as a source was Wikipedia. Because it's like just laid out so simply, and it's very easy for our brains to understand and read that format rather than going through like thousands of research papers and all of that stuff. So it's funny to almost see the parallels of like a human brain's development and then like the AI brain development as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, adding on to that, I think often like a lot of technology solutions look a lot like things that we see in nature, and I think the human brain is like part of that. So it makes sense that a solution that we see out that ends up being the best out in the world actually resembles our own brain. The tough part is we don't fully understand our own brains, obviously. Otherwise, I think the field of artificial intelligence would be moving a lot faster if we actually understood what was going on up there. But it's all very interesting.
Yeah. Last thing, kind of connecting the brain to these wikis and databases and stuff is someone recently, I guess this girl's like famous for something in a movie or something. She co-authored or came up with a new memory system. Her name's like Mila Jovovich or something like that.
Is this
Came
the
up with a
same
new.
person or a different person? It's the same
What do you mean?
person?
Yeah, they came up with the Mem Palace thing.
Yeah, that's also like an actress. I
Yes,
guess it is.
I guess her and some other guy that works at Libra came up with a new way to do memory that is the highest scoring of all the memory systems on recall, which is very, very hard to do. It apparently has 99% recall on most things. And the way that they constructed it is a classic concept in cognitive science called something like a memory palace, where when you're trying to remember something, if you tell yourself a story or close your eyes and imagine you're in a place or a room and you're walking through that room and you're relating specific memories to objects in the room, you're a lot more likely to remember what you're thinking about than if you just think of the explicit item or person or thing and try to remember it. So if you can try this at home, if you get 12 words or 10 words, try to remember them just by reading the words and then put the paper away, try to read them back, and you'll probably get like 4, 5 right maybe. But if you do it where you close your eyes for 5 minutes and think about a storyline that you can tie all of these items together, I bet you'll probably get close to 12 correct. And so they constructed a memory system for AI that's very similar to this. It has rooms in a palace that like are specific wikis kind of, and then within each there's drawers, and in those drawers are the actual files that go into the wiki, and then there's tunnels and hallways leading between all of the different systems. And it's definitely very complex. Maybe not the most elegant solution, but it is cool seeing people pull on these classic topics to try to explore new ways to do memory.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a good system.
Yeah.
Um,
One last thing, sorry, but before we switch topics, Martin, is I think this is maybe going back to the original topic that you had kind of discussed, and the reason why, Colin, you've been building out these wikis and these multiple sub agents under Randy. And I think this is going to be I think it's going to, because it's interesting because like OpenClaw came out and it was a great individual assistant. I think like the CEO of Brex was using an OpenClaw like almost daily, but that was just for him. It was like he was the only person using it because it's really difficult to enable like a 500 person company to use, one agent. And I think we're not there yet, but I think we're getting closer and closer to basically being able to replicate something like that across an entire company. And I think when we get there, I think that will be really exciting because I think if you can share knowledge and have an agent and then multiple sub agents that are all sharing knowledge and have their own wikis across like a 500 person org, I think, and do it like properly and figure out all the challenges with memory and like hallucinations. I think that is to me like a game changer and like a huge step change forward into how AI interacts with like large businesses.
Yeah, it's we like as an executive of a company or someone that has specific knowledge in a company, you know what you should say and what you shouldn't say for who is in the room, and you just kind of innately know that based on your knowledge of the company. So now the challenge is building an AI that has that same understanding and context of the whole company. Like they can obviously be talking about finance stuff when they're with the financial team and the executives, but if they're with someone who's in, I don't know, marketing, then the AI should not use that memory. And so creating that system, I think, is going to be the next sort of challenge for enterprise AI agents.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think same there. It's going to be just a continuous, I think, exploration of different like systems for that and whether maybe it should mimic how a human is, right? I think a lot of people think about agents as being similar to a human. Maybe it's got to be something completely different. And I think we'll just see more of that evolution, but it's actually a very interesting, like it feels like OpenClaw is great, like one to one. But we probably need new architectures or different ways of thinking for like one to many, where multiple people are interacting with really one agent, or many to many, where multiple people are interacting with a wide set of agents. Okay, moving on to another topic that I want to talk about. One thing that I found really interesting in the last few weeks, and this was really actually really last week. I think most of this stuff happened, but there's kind of three stories and data points that I think connect to a bigger trend here. So I'll go through them one by one, and I think the thread is pretty clear. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was the entire Claude code source code was actually leaked last week. So all the code that someone is using when they run Claude code on their computer, they actually don't know what that code is. That code is not public. You can kind of guess, some of the functionality, what might be happening. You can, intuit a lot of how it's set up, but the actual code and maybe some of the design decisions they're making behind the scenes, or some of the prompt that they're actually using behind the scenes, or even like some secret features, a lot of that got leaked last week, which is, I've never really seen something like this for such a big piece of software. It wasn't like someone got access to it and intentionally leaked it to the press or anything. I think it was just that in the process of uploading it to npm, which is this package manager that a lot of people use to download software from the internet. In the process of doing that, I guess like the source map or something got actually kind of included in that, which was very surprising. So that was kind of like a human error, I guess. But I think in the process of like building software more rapidly, it seems like maybe that's something that kind of slipped through the cracks. So that was kind of an interesting event on its own, which now I feel like a week later we're not even talking about it, but it really took over Twitter for a day. Because I mean, obviously, as a competitive advantage too, if you're open AI, it's like, I don't know. I don't know the legal ramifications of like how much you can use it, but like it's there and you've seen it and it's in your brain. So there's only so much you can do there. So that's kind of an interesting data point. The second data point is similarly in the context of npm, this package manager. A lot of people use this package called Axios, which it basically just allows you to like have access to the internet and like create like a kind of a browser in the cloud so you can do different things with it, putting it simply. And this is used by a ton of people. Like it's hard to even estimate how many, like what kind of software really uses this, but if I had to guess, it's like in the top 5 biggest packages on npm. It's like kind of the go-to. A lot of other things that you use, probably Claude code, I'm pretty sure actually uses Axios behind the scene, and Axios itself relies on other software, and it's open source, so anyone can contribute to it. There's certain safeguards in place for people to, prevent. Obviously, I can't just go and push some changes and have everyone have it on their computer and on their code. But what actually happened is that a malicious piece of software was included within a version of Axios. And therefore, if you were installing Axios at that time, you were getting that malicious piece of software with it, which, could steal information from your computer or, kind of see the information you're sending out, all that kind of stuff. And this was done by a North Korean group. And the way that was done was a little different. It was a social compromise, or social, what's it called? Social hacking? What is that? What is the term? It's like
It's
Social engineering.
social engineering. That's the term. Social engineering, where basically, I believe they were able to basically get one of the maintainers of this code to get on a Google call with them, and then to download a piece of software that then compromised their keys, and then therefore they were able to push code. So pretty complicated. You're like, okay, I'm going to get this guy's keys so I can push code to this that includes this other thing. And it was spotted pretty quickly by a lot of actually AI agents that are constantly scanning for this kind of stuff, but kind of huge risk, right? Like that could be really, really bad. Another kind of like, I would say like a mistake in the software world. And then the final one is more of an ongoing story, and it's the reliability of GitHub, which is where a huge amount of code is, where people collaborate on code. We use it. It's where code gets deployed. It's really like the core layer of so much work that's done in software engineering. And this is like an unofficial GitHub status page, but there's versions of this that are common in the industry, which is you show how reliable software is and you show uptime. And there's this concept of, I think, 4 nines or something. So you want 99.99% reliability. And so people talk about it in the concept of like nines. So I think the goal is 4 nines generally, which is like you're going to have some issues. If you're at 99.91%, you're now at 3 nines. 99.2%, you're at 2 nines. And GitHub is now at, well, they have a 9 in there, but they're technically at 0 nines right now because it's 89%. So this is an unofficial version of it. I will say, I think it's probably the least charitable way you could interpret GitHub's uptime recently, but you can see across a large amount of services, they've had just big outages recently. This is in the last 90 days. And this is some like a really critical piece of software, so you can't afford to have it have hour-long outages. You're seeing a lot of them on here, and this to me points to, you could say maybe just GitHub, they're not doing things properly these days, but we're seeing this, I think, in a lot of different software. And what this brought up for me, sorry, this has been a long-winded point, is like across these three things is, are we just making software bad by making it faster? And what are the consequences of that if we have all these great software engineers and we're shipping twice as much, but there's also, twice as many errors or three times as many errors as we did before? And is that something that like we need to be worried about? It's something I don't have like a clear conclusion on, so I'm curious how you guys think about it. I think at Lattice we're pretty, I think, aware of the impact of like shipping code faster and being very reliable and thorough in how we test things, but there's certain errors in code that you just don't find until you're in production at massive scale. So is this just something that has to happen if we're shipping twice as many features, or is there something that the industry is doing wrong, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking.
I think that it's a really great topic. And I personally think that the speed of coding agents and how fast an agent or AI can write code has outpaced how fast humans can review, and then also has outpaced any solutions for using AI to review code. It seems like we got the AI coding agents to work really, really well, really fast, and now they're awesome, but there's not the same system to refine and test and audit code. And a lot of people are now working on this because I think that's what people see as the large gap now is most engineers that are using AI are just spending all their time reviewing PRs and reviewing code before pushing it into production. And um, I'm not as in the weeds of coding and software development as you are, Martin, but I'm personally uh, not as worried about the fact that maybe the code right now is not as great. I think that we're going to have solutions catch up that ultimately kind of even it out. We over indexed one way and now we need something to come and level the playing field. And then, I don't know, maybe in a couple of years, it'll be basically like we're writing the same code as we were 5 years ago before AI, but now it's just way faster. So I personally am in the camp that it's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that meme. I don't know if I'm sure you guys have seen it of like what it was like it goes like waterfall, like building a car with waterfall, agile, and then AI. And for those that haven't seen it, like waterfall is like an agile or different like project methodologies. Waterfall, you build like each little part. Agile, you do work in little sprints, and then AI, you have like this mess, and then you refine backwards. I think for me the big thing is I think there's the side of it of like as developers, as product managers, as people that are building products, there's a concern, and I think of like shipping quality code, what will happen to this at scale. But I think the majority of people that interact with software, which is everyone, I don't think they care if as long as they can get their stuff and like get it in a reasonable, fast way that has no impact to them. Like I think this is yes. So this is the that meme. And yeah, so I think AI is like you get a spaceship, but then you're like, okay, I can't drive a spaceship. I need to take away the engines. I just need tires. I don't need wings, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think the majority of people don't really care. And I don't know if that's like the right way to think about it, but I wonder like what would make them care. I think it's like if somebody needs to get access to like their bank and they can't get into the app, then it's like, okay, I care a lot, right? Because I need to like transact money. And I wonder what that will look like, because I think also those larger organizations are probably not as reliant on other third parties or other code as much as like more small to medium sized businesses are. So I don't know what that will look like as larger companies start to rely more heavily on AI generated code. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like you don't care until you care for these things. Like, I mean, the reliability stuff is like, yeah, maybe you don't need four nines. You know, maybe you just need three or just one. I was doing some quick math right now. Like, if something has 95% uptime in a typical work week, that's 40 hours. That means that 2 hours out of the week it's not working. Um, in the abstract, maybe that's okay. You know, you can go do something else if, you know, for whatever reason your software is down, but in practice, if it's not working in the moment where you need it, that's not practical, right? Like if you're a doctor and you need you need the software right now, it doesn't matter if it's reliable over the weekend, you need it right now. I think that's the concern. And but I get Colin's point too of like, it's I think we've over indexed on like production and now we need to like focus on like quality and reviewing. And I mean, kind of similar to this, I didn't really know how to like connect these two threads, but OpenAI and Anthropic now are talking about how the new models, like there's this new Anthropic model called like Mythos or something, and which is a great name. And apparently it's going to be really good at finding security vulnerabilities, like apparently like dangerously so really good at that. So then that makes you think, okay, well, if we have this AI that's really, really good at finding security issues, it's probably going to be really, really good at finding other issues. So it's just about like pointing the energy towards that. And I think just to the nature of software, like, yeah, before it's taken so long to write code that like reviewing it wasn't really a bottleneck in any way, but now it's drastically shifted. And so I think we're just not, I think the software industry isn't fully oriented towards that yet. And maybe it's kind of similar to how we were talking about how companies were structured before and now it might need to be different. It's possible the software development process of agile of the last 20 years and using GitHub and using PRs and, you know, sprint planning, it's possible that that doesn't make sense anymore. And there's probably good bones there, but there's probably maybe like a paradigm shift in how we build software. I have no opinion on what that looks like, but it makes sense to me that as the tools evolve, our processes should evolve as well.
That's a really interesting point, actually, that I haven't, to be honest, even thought of is, yeah, I mean, you now have tools that change fundamentally how you do work. So the way we do work should probably change too. Like, I mean,
Yes.
and I think in a weird way, we see that in some of our projects where because we can iterate and build so fast that deciding something, if you're doing a 2 week sprint cycle, and then if you in sprint planning 2 weeks before, there's no like that feels like literally an eternity ago to decide what we're working on, a week and a half from that point. To have that day decide what we're building, yeah, like 8 business days later makes like I mean, we deviate from our sprint plans all the time because we finish what we had planned in like a week. So
Yeah.
I wonder if, yeah, the way that we think about that and organize that now fundamentally changes. And then I wonder if that also opens an opportunity then for small companies to supplant a lot of larger companies, because as a huge company, you can't just change the way you do work overnight. Like there's
Exactly.
a ton of people that are so used to doing one thing that to change that just makes no sense. So it's like another opportunity or risk for things like that. So yeah.
Seems like seems like we need to dream bigger then, huh?
We got to
We can
dream
finish
bigger.
this if we can finish
Reinvent
a
the company.
sprint. Yeah, if we can finish a sprint in a day that used to take 2 weeks, then imagine what you can do in a year.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, in some ways I was thinking about this because like yeah, we have like cursor cloud agents, for example, where like we can create all of our tickets in linear. That's a bottleneck in a way, right? We have a bunch of feedback on a product, we put it all in linear, and then or we have Randy or whoever like actually tackle on the code, right? So we could do like at Randy or at cursor, and then you can do 10 of those in parallel, right? It's not one person, it's agents and happening in parallel. So in theory you could have a first pass at all of those things done within like 15 minutes at most, right? Unless you're doing something very complicated. So in theory, you can have the whole sprint done in 15 minutes. In practice, you don't, because you need to review the code and like make sure it works, make sure, these 3 separate tickets that are both working on the same page, that they, come back in and combine well together. But that kind of goes to your point, Colin, of like now maybe the focus needs to be like, okay, maybe we don't need to be building coding tools. We need to be building reviewing tools of like, how do we actually make this part of it better? And that's something I've been running into, like working on a few different like iOS apps, like one for a client and one that we're just building ourselves, is like, I really just want it to be able to run its own iOS, like its own iPhone simulator, and test it for itself, because that would massively accelerate the like a review cycle rather than just me having to like set up the simulator every time. I haven't found a great solution there, but it feels like that's maybe where the energy should be pointing towards.
Fascinating stuff.
Good stuff. All right, we should wrap it up here. This is a long one, 50 minutes. We were yapping, got into some good topics. Good chatting. We'll have links in the description, and yeah, if this is interesting to you, you want to work with Lattice Partners, hit us up at latticepartners.ai or latticepartners.ai/contact. And yeah, talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for
Good
listening.
stuff. Thanks, guys. Peace.